Hello everyone, welcome to my video. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to combine for loop, while loop, and conditional statements in order to complete a task. So let's imagine here, I have 4 employees in my company, and here I have their age information in the first column. And what I want to do is that because they're my existing employees and I got their information in last year basically, and so this year their age increases one more year. So I want to update their age information automatically using Python coding. So here's what I'm facing right now. So it's really easy to update 20, 18, and 40, but it's not going to be easy to update the third value, refuse to answer, because basically I don't have the age information for that employee. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a logic flow there. So first, I'm going to go through each age information. And then I'm going to ask myself, is this age information a string value? Like the refuse to answer, that's going to be a string value. So if yes, I'm going to keep the original value and not touch upon it, because I basically cannot increase the age by 1 more year. But if the age information is not string value, so it's a number like the other values there, so then I'm going to add 1 to the current value. So that is my logic flow there. So based on the logic flow, I can write my Python coding using for loop and conditional statements to complete the task based on the logic flow. So let me show you how to read the Python coding here. So first, I create a list that includes all the 4 age information and assign the list to a variable called age. And then I create another new variable called age_new and assign a vacant list to the new variable, because later I'm going to add some information to the new list to create a new age list, basically. Then I'm going to use this for loop, and this for loop is aligned with the first 2 variables. It's not indented. So I'm going to use this for loop to go through each item inside the age list. So let's start with the first value when we go through each item there. So first, the first item is going to be 20. So we say if type of that item is not string. So the first item is 20 and the type of 20 is integer, so it's not string. So for the first item, the if statement is going to be true. So the following statement will be executed by Python coding because it's under the if statement. So here we say that we're going to update the item by 1. So item will now become 21. And then we're going to append the item to the new list. So basically we're going to append 21 to this list. And this new list for age_new get the first new value 21. So that's how we can read it. Okay, so then we're going to go back to the for loop and then move on to the next item inside the age list. That's 18 now. So now item becomes 18. And then we ask ourselves, if the type of the item is not string, so we know that the type of 18 is going to be integer, it's not string. So this is a true statement. Then we're still going to run these 2 lines of coding. So we're going to still update the value of item by 1. So it's going to become 19. Item will become 19. And then we're going to append the value of item to the age_new list. So we're going to append 19 to this list in addition to the previous 21, right? So then that's how we're going to do it. And then after we are done, we just go back to the for loop again and move on to the next value in our list. That's refuse to answer. That's going to be the item value here. So we ask ourselves this question: if the type of that item is not string, we know that's going to be a false statement because the type of the this item is string. So then we have to move on to the else statement because our if statement is false this time. So we're going to execute the else statement, which is append the item directly to the age_new. So we're going to append refuse to answer to this list directly. That's what we're going to do. And finally, we're going to move back to the for loop again. And then we're going to move on to the last item, that's 40. So here, we're going to go through this if statement again. If the type of 40 is not string, which is true, because the type of this value is going to be integer. It's not a string. So we're going to go through this line of coding. Python will run this line of coding for you. We're going to update 40 and add number 1 to it. It becomes 41. And we're going to then append this item value 41 to the new list. And that's all our for loop. And we're done with the for loop now because we have iterate. We have actually gone through every single item and the for loop is over. And after it's over, we jump out of the whole for loop. You can see that. Then we print our age_new variable to get its values there. And you can see the print function is not indented because this print function is aligned with the for loop and the other two variables. They're aligned with each other. And because print, this function is not part of the for loop. Any parts of the for loop should be indented like this way. So finally, when we run this coding, we're going to get this new list. So the vacant list has been updated to this new list. So that's the whole logic there. So let's move on to another scenario there. Okay, so you know that previously my company has 4 employees. Each row here stands for an employee's information. And that is my first 4 rows there. And I got their information last year. So I entered their information last year for the first 4 rows. But for the last 4 rows, they are from my new employees that I just recruit this year. So basically for my new employees, I don't have to update their age information. But for my old employees, I have to update their new information because I basically collected their age information last year. So that's my task, my goal. But you may also notice that both existing employees and new employees, they have some string values they refuse to answer, which I cannot touch upon. So I have to create my logic flow, and that can help me to, help me understand what I shall do to complete the task. So basically, here's my logic. I'm still going to go through every single data point for that age column. I'm going to go through every single age information here. And then for each age information, I'm going to ask myself, is that age information among the first 4 data points? Basically, is this age information from an existing employee? If no, that means the age information is from a new employee, then keep the original value. I don't have to update it. But if that age information is from the first 4 data points, means that age information is from an existing employees, then I have to ask myself this question, is this age information a string value, like refuse to answer? If yes, then keep the original value because I cannot update it. But if it's not a string value, if it's a number, then I can just add 1 to its current value to update the age of my existing employee because I know that I collected their age information last year and I have to update it. I have to update their age information for this year. So that's the whole logic. So now we want to basically execute the logic through Python coding here. So let me show you how to read the whole coding here. Okay, so first, like before, we create this age variable by assigning a list to this age variable, and that list contains every single age information there from the existing employees to new employees. And then create another variable called age_new and assign a vacant list to this variable like before. But this time we add another one here. We create another variable called I and assign number 1 here. So we're going to see why we need to have this new variable later. So then followed, we create a for statement. We're going to create a for loop to iterate through every single item inside this age variable. So the first item is going to be 20, as you can see from the list. So that's here, 20. So basically, we're going to go through each item. So the first run, item has the value of 20. So then we're going to ask ourselves this question for the if statement, if I is less than 5. So we know that this time I is going to be 1. That's the initial value we assign to the variable I. So I is less, so 1 is less than 5. So it's a true statement. So because it's true statement, so everything that is indented beneath that if statement is going to be executed. So we have another inner if and else statement within that if statement, as you can see, as I just circled here. So we're going to read the next if statement if the type of that item is not string. So here the item refers to the value 20 and the type of it is not string. So this is a true statement. So when this if statement is true, that means the else statement here is not going to be executed. So we can ignore it. So then the following two lines will be executed under the if statement here. So the item will be updated by adding number 1. So the item will become 21. And then we can add this 21 appended to this variable age underscore new, the vacant list. So that's how we can read it. And also you can see that this if statement is because it's true, right? So the else statement here that is aligned with the if statement will not be wrong, okay? Because this L is opposite to the if here. And then after we complete all the conditional statements, we're gonna here update our I value by adding 1 to it. So our I here will become 2. And then we're gonna go back to the if statement to do another round of processing. So let's see here, we go back. So now when we go back and we just move to the second item here, 18, okay? And then what we're gonna do is that, so this time, remember last time our I has been updated to 2. So 2 is still less than 5, so it's gonna be a true statement. So when this if statement is true and the else statement that is aligned with that if statement is gonna be ignored by Python, okay? And the following lines of coding under the if statement will be wrong. So here, if we're gonna have another if statement. So see here, if the type of that item is not string, so we know that the type of 80 is not string. So this is a true statement. So that means the else that is aligned with this if statement will be ignored. Okay, and we're only gonna run the statements within the if statement. So we're gonna update the value here. This line of coding will be executed. So the item value will become 19. And we're gonna append this 19 value to the age underscore list. So 19 will become part of this list that's here. As you can see, it has been appended here. Okay, so then after we're done with all the if else statements, we're gonna then move to this line of coding. It's not part, this line of coding is not part of the if else statement because it's aligned with them. It's not part of it. It's not indented underneath them. So this I will be updated. So now it will become number 3. And then after I has been updated, we go back to the for loop to move on to the next value. Okay, so let me show you here. So now we have moved to the third value inside this age list. That's going to be the item value here. So for this particular value, refuse to answer. Now we're going to move on to the next line of code. If I is less than 3, I has been already updated to number 3. Number 3 is still less than 5. So we're going to execute the following lines of coding. And then ignore this else statements because our if statement is true here. So then we can ask ourselves if the type of item is not string. We know this if statement is false because the type of this value is string. So then we can execute the else part. We're going to ignore the whole if part. And we're going to execute the else part means that we're going to append the item value directly to the vacant list. So basically we're going to add refuse to answer that value directly to this list without any processing. And finally, after we're done with all the if else statements, we're going to move to the I. We're going to update our I to number 4 now. And then we're going to move back to the for loop. That's the whole logic. So let's see here. So now I has become number 4, just note it here. And then we have moved to the fourth item now for the for loop. And item value has 40. So for 40 in this age list, if I is less than 5, so this time, this is still going to be a true statement. So we're going to cross over the else statements here, and we're only going to run the if statements now. So now if type of that item is not string, which is true, then we're going to cross over this else statements. and only run these 2 lines of coding that is under the if statement here. So we're going to update the 40 value to 41, and we're going to append this item value to the age new variable. So that's why it becomes here 41. And then we're done with the if else statements. We're going to jump to this line of coding to update I. So I will become number 5. That's now interesting. And after I has been updated, we go back to the for loop again. So let's see what's going to happen. So now I has become 5, and we jump over to the for loop again to move on to 50, which actually is the age information of our new employee, because the last 4 parts are for new employees. So for 50, this value item, okay, if I is less than 5, we know this is going to be a false statement because I has now become 5, and 5 is not less than 5. So the whole if statements will not be executed, but the else statement will be executed. So basically, we're going to execute this line of coding. We're going to append this item value 50 to the age underscore directly. So this is how it's here. And you can see now we're going to update I again by adding number 1 to it. So it becomes 6. We see that for the rest of the I's, we're not going to run this if statement because the if I is less than 5 will always be false. And we always going to just directly append those values to the list. That's why for the new employees' age information, we will not touch upon their age. We will not add number 1 to their information. So that fulfills our goal there. Okay, so that's our second scenario. Well, let's see another scenario. Now we know that we have 8 employees, and the first 4 rows are for the old employees, for the existing employees, and the last 4 rows are for the new employees. Let's see, our goal this time is that we want to calculate the average age of our old employees, and we don't want to focus on the new employees' age information. Okay, so that's our goal here. So given that goal, here is our logic. So let me show you. First, we're still going to go through each age information in that age list. And then we're going to ask ourselves this question. We're going to focus on basically the index value of each item. So we're going to ask ourselves, is each data point's index value less than 4? If no, basically that tells us that that age information is from a new employee. So we're going to ignore the data point. We don't need it to calculate our average age for our old employees. So if the index value is less than 4, means that that item is one of the first 4 items. So then we can ask ourselves this question: is this a string value? If yes, we're going to ignore the value because we cannot calculate average from a string value. But if it's not a string value, if it's a number, then we add the value to a new list called age underscore existing. Then after we have created that list with all old employees' age information into it, and then we're going to divide the sum value of that list and divide it by the list length to create the average age for our old employees. So that's our whole logic. So let's see how we can do it through our Python coding here. So first, like before, we have to create a list, okay? So basically, we can create a list there. Let's just call it age underscore new. And we have already basically updated our employees' age information by adding number 1 to all the old employees' age to update their age information. So we have this new list, and we assign the list to our variable called age new because we have updated every single person's age information. And then we create another variable called age underscore existing, and we set a vacant list to this variable. And next, we're going to create another variable called I. We assign the initial value 0 to it, because this time we're going to focus on index value, and we know that index value of any list starts with 0, and that is fine. And now this time we want to generate a while loop. not for loop now. So you can see the while loop and I and age, new age existing, they're aligned with each other. So that means they are not part of each other. They're just running. We're just going to run each line coding one by one. So now we're going to run this while loop and we ask ourselves this question, while I is less than 4. So here I has the initial value of 0. So I is 0 here. So while 0 is less than 4, that's a true statement. So we're going to then run the following lines of coding under while here, while loop. So you can see all these following statements, they are indented. So that means they're part of the while loop. They're part of the loop here. Okay, so let's read each one here. So first we're going to ask ourselves this question. If type age underscore new. Age underscore new is this list. And age underscore square brackets and inside it has the I value. So basically we're using this expression to get to one item inside the list. So we can use I as an index value. So I here is 0. So basically we use age underscore new and square brackets 0 to retrieve the first item from this list. That's 21. So this whole part is 21 now this time. So the type of 21 is integer. So it's not string value. So this is true statement. Okay. So because the if statement is true, so we're going to ignore the else part. That's our logic, right? Because the else and if, they are opposite to each other. So we're going to run this line of coding. We're going to append this value to our age underscore existing list. So we're going to basically append 21 to this list. That becomes our first item. Like here, you see that. Okay. And then once we're done with the if else statement, the conditional statements, we're going to jump out of that conditional statement, and then we're going to update I. I is not part of that conditional statement because it's not indented under if or else. It's parallel with them. So we basically going to update I by adding number 1 to it. So I becomes number 1. And then we're going to move back to the while loop again. So let's see here. So I becomes number 1 now. And when I becomes number 1, we move back to the while loop because it's a loop. So we're going to move back. So I become number 1 and number 1 is still less than 4. So this one still is true. And that means we're going to still execute the following while loop again. And then we're going to execute while loop and move on to the if statement. This time, I becomes 1. So here, age underscore new index number 1 means the value 19. Index number, this is index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, 4, So index number 1 is 19. And the type of this value is not string. So this is true statement. So we're still going to ignore the else part and just run the if part. So we're going to actually add this value 19 to this list here, append this value to this list. So that's why we have 19 here. And then we're going to finish our conditional statements and move on to this line of coding to update I again by adding number 1 to it. So I becomes number 2. And then we move back to the while loop again. So let's see here. So now I becomes number 2 and we move back to the while loop because it's not done yet. And while I is less than 4, because our I is now number 2. Number 2 is still less than 4, so it's a true statement. Then we're still going to run this while loop without stopping. So here, if type age underscore index number now is 2. So we know that number 2 is this item here. So here is our question. If the type of that value is not string, we know this is actually a false statement because it is a string value. So then we're gonna not run this if statement. We're gonna move to the else part and run the pass line of coding. What does the pass mean? Pass means we're gonna pass this value and doing nothing. Okay. And after that, we're just gonna jump to this next line of coding, update our I value by adding number 1 to it. So our I becomes number 3. And then we move back to the while loop again because number 3 is still less than 4. The while loop will still be going. So let's see here. So our I will be our I will become number 3 now. And we're going to move on to the while loop again. I is number 3. And number 3 is still less than 4. So it's true statement. We're still going to run this while loop again. And then we're going to go through this if statement and use number 3, number I, as our index number. So number 3 refers to this value, 41. So 41 is not string. So it's a true statement. And we're going to run this line of coding, add 41 to this new list. So 41 is there. Okay. And then we're going to update I value by adding 1 to its current value. So I becomes number 4. And we go back to the while loop again. So this time you can see that when I becomes number 4 and we go back to the while loop, and you see that while I is less than 4 is no longer true anymore because I is number 4 now. 4 is not less than 4, which means that the while loop will stop running. And you can see that because all these are part of the whole while loop, all these like if statement, else statement, they're indented, they're aligned with each other, and they're all indented underneath while statement. So all these part will not be running. So this while loop is basically over. And then Python will jump to this line of coding, print out each existing for you. This is the output for this print function. And then we did another operation. We create a variable here called average underscore age underscore existing. And this variable, we assign some value to it. We use the sum value of that list. So by calling the sum function, we can get the sum of all the numbers inside that list. Basically, this is the list. We're going to get the sum of all these numbers, 21 plus 19 plus 41, and use the sum value to divide it by the length of that list, which is number 3. So we use the sum divided by the length, and we can get the average value. And then we just print out the average value, which is going to be 27.0 here. So that's how we can get the average age of our existing employees. So that's all. Thank you for watching.